Welcome to Mr. Abyss, where we dive deep into the most chilling real-life encounters that happen in the places we least expect them. Today we're exploring 3 terrifying back-to-school stories that will make you think twice about those seemingly innocent hallways and empty classrooms. These stories come from students, teachers, and staff members who experienced something they'll never forget. So grab a friend, turn off the lights, let us know in the comments where you're listening from, and let's begin.
Story 1. The Night Janitor.
Conversational, setting the scene. Our first story comes from Marcus, a college sophomore at a large university in Ohio. Like many students, Marcus preferred studying late at night when the library was quiet and nearly empty. What he didn't expect was to discover he wasn't as alone as he thought. It was September 15th, just 3 weeks into the fall semester. Marcus had claimed his usual spot on the library's 4th floor, a secluded corner desk near the psychology section, where he could spread out his materials without bothering anyone. The building officially closed at midnight, but students with ID cards could stay until 2 a.m. Intimate conspiracy forever into the future. Around 12:30 a.m., Marcus heard the familiar sound of the janitor's cart rolling down the hallway. Nothing unusual there. The cleaning crew always worked the overnight shift. But as the sound grew closer, Marcus noticed something odd. The squeaking of the cartwheels had a strange rhythm to it. Squeak, squeak, stop. Squeak, squeak, stop. Like someone was deliberately pausing every few feet. Slightly faster, nervous energy. Marcus tried to focus on his textbook, but the sound was distracting. When it stopped completely, he assumed the janitor had moved to a different floor. Pause, then lower. That's when he heard the footsteps. Measured, creepy, slow, deliberate footsteps circling the perimeter of the 4th floor. Marcus could track the sound as it moved from the east side around the back where the old archives were stored, then along the west wall. Building dread. The footsteps were getting closer to his corner. Nervous energy. Marcus decided to pack up and leave. As he quietly gathered his books, he peered around the corner toward the main aisle. Pause, then whispered intensity. There was no one there. No janitor, no cleaning cart, nothing. But the footsteps continued, now coming from directly above him on the 5th floor. Here's the thing. Marcus knew the library layout well. The 5th floor had been under renovation for the past 2 months. It was completely gutted, with no flooring in most areas. No one was supposed to be up there, and even if they were, there was nothing to walk on except concrete and exposed beams. To climax. As Marcus stood there, frozen, the footsteps stopped. Long pause. Then, directly above his head, he heard a loud thud, like something heavy had been dropped. Urgent. That's when he ran. The next morning, Marcus asked the head librarian about the overnight janitor. She looked at him strangely and said, "Marcus, we don't have a night janitor. The cleaning crew works from 6 to 10 p.m. before the late night study hours begin." She paused, then added, "We used to have one about 10 years ago, but he died in an accident on the 5th floor during the last renovation." Marcus never studied past midnight again. Story 2. The Substitute's Secret. New energy, slightly upbeat. Our second story takes us to Roosevelt Elementary in small-town Pennsylvania, where third-grade teacher Sarah Chen encountered something that still gives her nightmares 5 years later. Setting scene. It was early October, and Sarah had been teaching at Roosevelt for just 2 months, her first job right out of college. She loved her students and was finally feeling confident in her routine. That Tuesday started like any other day, except their usual art teacher, Mrs. Rodriguez, had called in sick. The substitute who arrived was memorable. She introduced herself as Mrs. Hollow, spelled Hollow, and explained she'd been substitute teaching in the district for many years. She was an older woman, probably in her 60s, with silver hair pulled back in a tight bun and thick glasses that magnified her pale blue eyes, building curiosity. What struck Sarah as odd was how the children reacted to her. Slower. These were 8-year-old kids who typically got excited about any break in routine. But when Mrs. Hollow walked into the art room, they became unusually quiet and well-behaved. Almost unnaturally so. During lunch, Sarah decided to check on her students. As she approached the art room, she could hear Mrs. Hollow's voice. But something was off. She seemed to be speaking in a different language. Or maybe it wasn't a language at all. It sounded like backwards talking, or words played in reverse. Sarah quietly opened the door and peeked inside. Her students were sitting perfectly still at their desks, staring straight ahead with blank expressions. They weren't working on any art project. They were just sitting. And Mrs. Hollow was standing at the front of the room, her back to the door, speaking in those strange backward sounds, urgent but controlled. Sarah immediately entered the room. "Excuse me, is everything all right in here?" Mrs. Hollow turned around, and Sarah will never forget what she saw. Lower, more serious. The woman's eyes looked completely different. Not just pale blue anymore, but almost translucent, like looking through fog. "Oh, yes, dear," Mrs. Hollow said in a perfectly normal voice. "We're just having a quiet reflection time." The children suddenly blinked and looked around, as if waking up from a trance. They seemed confused about why they weren't working on any art projects. That afternoon, Sarah went to the main office to ask about Mrs. Hollow. The secretary, who had worked there for 15 years, looked puzzled. "I'm sorry. Who?" "We didn't call any substitute today. Mrs. Rodriguez called in sick. So we just had the students do quiet reading in their regular classrooms." Realization dawning. Sarah insisted that a substitute had been there, describing Mrs. Hollow in detail. The secretary's face went pale. She disappeared into the principal's office and returned with an old staff directory from 1987. She pointed to a black and white photo of a woman with silver hair and thick glasses. Margaret Hollow, art teacher, 1975 to 1987. Final revelation. Below the photo, in small print, it said, "Slower, deliberate, deceased, October 3rd, 1987. Dedicated teacher who loved her students and believed in the power of quiet reflection." The incident happened on October 3rd, exactly 34 years later. Sarah transferred schools the following semester. Story 3, Room 237. For our third story, we're heading to Westfield High School in Colorado, where senior Jake Morrison discovered that some rooms are kept locked for very good reasons. Jake was the type of student who knew every shortcut, every unlocked door, and every way to avoid the crowded hallways between classes. As student council president, he had legitimate reasons to be in different parts of the building, which gave him access to areas most students never saw. Building context. During his fourth year at Westfield, Jake noticed something odd about the second floor of the east wing. There was a classroom, room 237, that he'd never seen used. It was always locked. No teacher name on the door, no class schedule posted. When he asked other students about it, most said they'd never even noticed it was there. Investigative energy. Jake's curiosity got the better of him. Slight mischief in Doan. One afternoon in late September, while delivering student council flyers to teachers, he decided to investigate. The hallway was empty during sixth period, and he tried the door handle. Pause. Locked, as expected. But as he turned to leave, he noticed something strange, observational. There was a very thin strip of light coming from under the door. Pause. Not the bright fluorescent light from the hallway, but a softer, warmer glow, like candlelight or lamplight. Building tension. Jake knelt down and peered under the door gap. What he saw made no sense. The room appeared to be set up like a 1950s classroom. Wooden desks arranged in perfect rows. A large chalkboard with cursive writing he couldn't quite read, and old-style maps hanging on the walls. But that was impossible. Westfield High had been built in 1998, and all the classrooms had modern desks and whiteboards. Jake was determined to get inside that room. The next day, he volunteered to help the custodial staff after school, hoping to get access to a master key. Mr. Peterson, the head custodian, was happy for the help and handed Jake a ring of keys to lock up the computer lab. Reverse energy. After Mr. Peterson left for the day, Jake made his way to room 237. Tension building, his hands were shaking as he tried different keys. The fourth key turned, and the door opened with a soft creak. Awe and fear. The room was exactly as he'd glimpsed under the door, but seeing it in full was overwhelming. Descriptive, amazed. Everything looked perfectly preserved from decades ago. The wooden floors gleamed, the chalkboard was covered in neat cursive handwriting about a history lesson on World War II, and there were even vintage textbooks stacked on the teacher's desk. But as Jake stepped further into the room, he noticed something that made his blood run cold. There were backpacks hanging on hooks along the wall. Modern backpacks, JanSport, Nike, brands that definitely weren't from the 1950s, and they looked fresh. Not vintage or dusty, but like they'd been hung there recently. Jake approached the teacher's desk and found an attendance sheet. The date at the top read September 28th, yesterday's date, but the names on the list made him dizzy. Jennifer Walsh, Michael Torres, Amanda Chen. These were students who had gone missing from Westfield High over the past 3 years. Students whose disappearances had never been solved. Panicked, Jake ran for the door, but it slammed shut behind him. Frantic, the handle wouldn't turn and his keys were useless from the inside, building terror. That's when he heard it. The sound of footsteps in the hallway, getting closer. Not the regular footsteps of a teacher or student, but something else. something that dragged slightly with each step. The footsteps stopped right outside room 237. Jake held his breath as the door handle slowly turned. A woman's voice, sweet but somehow wrong, called through the door. "Jake? Jake Morrison? You're late for class, dear. We've been waiting for you." Desperate escape, Jake looked around frantically and spotted an old window that opened onto the school's roof. Urgent, without thinking, he climbed out and managed to make his way to the main building's fire escape. Relief. He ran home and didn't return to school for 3 days. Resolution with lingering mystery. When Jake finally worked up the courage to go back, he went straight to room 237, anticlimactic but eerie. The door was locked, no light came from underneath, and when he convinced Mr. Peterson to open it, they found just an empty storage room filled with old desks and dusty boxes. But Jake swears that sometimes, walking past that hallway, he can still hear the faint sound of a lesson being taught inside a room that officially doesn't exist. These 3 stories remind us that schools, places where we spend so much of our young lives, hold more than just memories of tests and friendships. Sometimes they hold echoes of the past, shadows of those who came before us, and mysteries that don't fit neatly into any textbook. Engaging with audience. Have you ever experienced something unexplainable at your school? A voice calling your name in an empty hallway, a figure that disappeared when you looked twice, or a room that felt different from all the others. Invitation. Share your stories in the comments below. You might not be alone in your experience. Thanks for watching, and remember, when you're walking through those school hallways this year, pay attention to what's around you. You never know what might be paying attention to you, too. Don't forget to like this video if it gave you chills. Subscribe for more scary stories, and ring that notification bell so you never miss our latest uploads. Dream well, and we'll see you in the next video.